this point, we've determined that we have a brake system problem by the fact that our ABS and brake lights are on constant illumination. We've determined that our problem is based on a failure in our steel brake line that runs across the rear axle of the vehicle. We've loosened our bleeder screws and know that they will allow fluid to pass, and we've determined the exact location of the problem itself. First, we disconnect the battery on the negative side. This makes sure that we have no way to cause any kind of a spark that could cause a fire. This also allows the ABS computer to reset itself while we do our mechanical work. In most cases, this will eliminate the ABS and brake lights from being illuminated, as the system will be sealed again without air contaminating it. We now have to remove the faulty brake line, so we first locate the connection points of the line on the vehicle. There are threaded tubing flare nuts on both ends of the steel line, and these will need to be removed from the wheel cylinder and the flex hose block. Before we remove our steel line from the flex hose block, we use a vice grip or similar clamp to clamp off and close the hose. This prevents air from entering the rest of the brake system and makes our bleeding process much easier. We must use a tubing flare wrench in order to get the grip that we need on the flare nut. This is a special wrench that grips the flare nut on 4 sides, yet allows itself to be slid over the steel brake line. Once the flare nuts have been loosened and completely unscrewed from their connection points, we must loosen the metal clamp on the axle to release the line completely. Once we've done this, we can take it off the vehicle. Use a tape measure to measure the entire length of the line once it's off. You'll need to get the closest length available, and it's generally better to buy it a bit on the longer side rather than the shorter side. Make sure that you buy the correct line for your vehicle by taking in the old line to the auto parts store so they can match up the correct flare nuts. An inverted flare cannot interchange with a bubble flare and vice versa. Do not throw the old line away until you have completely installed the new line. We have found our problem and removed the faulty steel brake line. We've measured the line and purchased the line length closest to what we need and made sure that we have the correct size and type of flares and flare nuts on the line. Now we have to make this straight piece of brake line fit where the bent and curved old line fit. As with anything that requires a fit, it's always good to have a pattern. That's the reason we hold on to the old line until we have the new line installed. The best way to make this fit is to mimic the old line as best we can, allowing for the slight line length difference and making sure that we can thread the ends into our connection points. Start at the end that screws into the wheel cylinder on the backing plate. This end will be the most difficult to adjust once we go to install. Line up the new line with your old line, and using your fingers, gently bend the corners as closely as you can. AGS Polyarmor brake line has the patented Easy Bend technology to aid you in this process. Continue to bend until you have something that closely resembles the old line. We've now found our problem, removed the faulty steel brake line, and used our old line to make our pattern for our new replacement line. At this point, we are ready to install the brake line onto the vehicle. Before installing, it's a good idea to use an air hose and blowgun to blow compressed air through the new brake line. This removes any possibility of contamination within the line that could have accumulated. Any contamination can cause problems later on with ABS sensors, or could even cause a wheel cylinder or caliper to develop a score within the piston bore, causing a possibility of a leak. Now, screw your first line end loosely into the wheel cylinder. Start to tweak the line gently as needed to make sure that it fits around all the obstructions, taking care that it doesn't lie against anything. This will ensure that it doesn't rub a hole and fail prematurely. If removing the line revealed a clamp on the axle, then make sure that the line fits into the clamp. Screw the loose end into the last connection point, tweaking as necessary to make sure that you get the flare nut started straight. Tighten both ends as tight as possible using the tubing flare nut wrench, and make sure that the line is still free and not able to rub on anything. Our final operation is to bleed the system to purge any air that has been trapped within. Because of installing an empty piece of brake line, there will be substantial air in the system from our beginning point of our connection to our ending point. In this case, from the flex hose block to the rear wheel cylinder. I prefer to use a gravity bleeding method because it's easier on the system than force bleeding and can be done by a single person. We begin by removing the cover on our master cylinder and making sure that it's completely full of DOT3 brake fluid. We leave the cover off the master cylinder so that it will have a vent and allow the fluid to drain through the system itself. We then loosen our bleeder screw and remove our vice grip clamp off of our flex hose. It will take several minutes to begin to see fluid start to drip out of the bleeder screw, but be patient. Once it begins to drip, allow it to drip for 10 to 15 minutes. Continue to monitor the master cylinder level and add fluid as necessary, not allowing the level to go below halfway. If the master cylinder is allowed to become empty, then the entire system will be contaminated with air and you will have to open all 4 wheel bleeder screws, making it a much longer process. Once we've determined that we have fluid coming out in a steady stream and we've tightened our bleeder screw, we make sure our master cylinder is full and reinstall the cap. We then start the vehicle, press the brake pedal gently, and make sure that it has a firm, solid feel. Check for illuminated lights, and if there are none, drive the vehicle slowly and controlled and test the brake pedal for sponginess.